The security guard didn't even look up from his phone when Warrant Officer Celestine Adjoa-Mensah walked through the glass doors of the Rideau Center parking garage elevator lobby that Friday evening in November. He looked up when she pressed the button for P2. "Excuse me." His chair scraped back. He was young, maybe 23, broad across the shoulders, wearing a black vest with the Securitas logo above his heart. His name tag said Bryce. "This elevator is for authorized personnel and residents only." Celestine Adjoa-Mensah was 51 years old. She was wearing a grey wool coat, sensible boots, and carrying a reusable bag from the Bywood Market with a bunch of kale sticking out the top. She had driven 4 hours from Ottawa because her daughter's baby shower was tomorrow, and she wanted to help set up. She pressed the button again. "Ma'am." Bryce stepped in front of the panel, not beside her, in front of her. "I'm going to need you to step back and show me some identification." She looked at him the way only a woman who has spent 23 years in the Canadian Armed Forces can look at someone. A look that is not angry, not hostile, not even particularly surprised. Just very, very still. "I'm visiting my daughter," she said. "Unit 412. I understand that, but I'm going to need you to verify that." You didn't ask the woman before me to verify anything. The woman before her had been white, mid-40s, carrying dry cleaning. Bryce didn't respond to that. He said, "Protocol," as if that word explained something, and held out his hand. What Celestine did next would be the thing people talked about for the next 2 weeks. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She set her market bag on the floor beside her, carefully, so the kale wouldn't fall out, opened her coat, reached into the inside breast pocket, and placed 2 cards flat in Bryce's open palm. He looked down. The first was her KF identification card. The second was a business card from the office of Brigadier General Adeyemi OC4 her commanding officer at 2 Canadian Mechanized Brigade Group, with a handwritten note on the back that said, "Call if anyone gives you trouble." Yemi. It was a joke between them, something he'd pressed into her hand at her last deployment debriefing. She'd kept it in her wallet without thinking much about it. Bryce looked at the cards for a long moment. Then he looked at her. Then he looked at the cards again. He stopped. "The elevator, please," said Celestine Adjoa-Mensah, warrant officer, 3rd Battalion Royal Canadian Regiment, 23 years of service, 2 tours, 1 operational commendation, and a daughter whose baby shower was tomorrow morning and whose nursery shelves still needed to be assembled. Bryce stepped aside. He didn't say sorry. She didn't wait for it. Her daughter, Nkechi, was 27 and 8 months pregnant and furious before Celestine even got through the door. "What took you so long?" "I was watching from the window. I saw you go into the elevator lobby 12 minutes ago." "There was a small situation," said Celestine, setting her coat on the hook by the door with the kind of deliberate calm that made Nkechi narrow her eyes. "What kind of situation?" "The kind that resolved itself." Nkechi was a labor lawyer. She had her mother's stillness and her father's instinct for knowing when someone was underplaying something. She folded her arms over her belly and waited. Celestine told her. Nkechi's face did something complicated. "He stopped you, he did, and asked for I did. Mom, that building has been your daughter's home for 2 years. You have been here, how many times? 11. 12 if you count Christmas, and he has never stopped you before. He wasn't working before, he's new." Celestine picked up the kale and moved toward the kitchen. "Do you have a salad spinner?" "Mom, I'm fine, Nkechi. That's not the point. I know it's not the point. So what are you going to do?" Celestine set the kale in the sink and turned on the cold tap. She thought about this. Really thought about it, the way she thought about logistics and resource allocation, and the particular kind of patience that is not passivity, but is sometimes mistaken for it. "I'm going to help you put up those shelves," she said. "And tomorrow we're going to have a beautiful shower. And on Monday, I'm going to write a letter." Nkechi looked at her for a moment. "To who?" "To the property management company, to the Securitas regional office, to the building's equity officer, who I found on their website before I left Ottawa. She turned off the tap, and I'm going to CC Yemi's office because he told me to call if anyone gave me trouble, and I think he would appreciate being informed rather than surprised." Nkechi was quiet for a beat. "Then you already planned this in the elevator, didn't you?" "I planned the first draft. The rest will come together over the weekend." What happened next is the kind of thing that gets described differently, depending on who's telling it. The building management company, Carlton Realty Group, would later describe it as a procedural complaint that was addressed promptly through our standard resolution process. The Securitas regional director, a man named Faulkner, would describe it as an internal review that resulted in retraining and clarification of protocols. A spokesperson for 2 Canadian Mechanized Brigade would decline to comment, which is what they always say, which everyone in Ottawa knows means something happened. What actually happened was this. On Monday morning, Celestine drove back to Petawawa and wrote the letter she had drafted in her head over the weekend, while assembling flat-pack shelves and arranging onesies and explaining to her daughter's book club friends, who all wanted to know, that she genuinely was fine, thank you, and that she had handled it. The letter was 3 pages. It was factual, precise, and written in the tone of someone who has spent 2 decades filing reports that have to survive scrutiny. It documented the incident with timestamps. It named Bryce by his full name, which she'd gotten from the lobby registry on her way out Sunday afternoon. It noted, without editorializing, that she had observed no other resident being stopped for identification in the 4 times she had passed through the lobby over the course of the weekend. It requested, in clear and numbered language, a written response within 10 business days, a review of the guards' actions against the building's stated inclusion policies, and confirmation of what training protocols currently existed around identity verification requests. She sent it at 8:47 a.m. The CC list included Brigadier General O.C. Forjaw's office, the Ontario Human Rights Commission inquiry line, and her own personal email for records. By 11:15 a.m., she had received a call from someone named Deirdre at Carlton Realty Group, who described herself as the Director of Resident Relations, and whose voice had the particular quality of someone who has just been handed a piece of paper by their supervisor and told to deal with it. Warrant Officer Adjua Mensah, thank you so much for reaching out. We take all resident and visitor concerns extremely seriously, and we want to make sure. I appreciate that, said Celestine. I'll be expecting the written response within 10 business days. Of course. I also want to say, on behalf of Carlton Realty, in writing, said Celestine pleasantly, would be best. I prefer to have things documented. There was a short silence. Of course, said Deirdre. What Celestine did not know, and would not find out until Nkechi called her on Wednesday evening, was that Bryce had done this before. Not with Celestine specifically. With other people, other women, residents or frequent visitors who looked a certain way and whom he had apparently developed a habit of requesting identification from while waving through people who did not. One of the other women, a nurse named Daphne Kouassi Tremblay, who visited her elderly father in Unit 309 every week, had mentioned it to the front desk in passing 2 months ago, and been told that the guard was just being thorough. She hadn't pursued it, she'd thought about it, but she had her father to worry about, and 4 shifts a week at the General, and not enough hours in the day. When Nkechi heard about this, from another resident who'd seen the letter, because in a building of 40 units, things travel. She called Daphne. They talked for an hour. Daphne wrote her own account. A third resident, a woman named Liatu Sankare, who worked at a downtown law firm and had been stopped twice in 1 week back in September, added hers. By Thursday, there were 3 letters. By the following Monday, there were 5. Celestine did not organize this. She would be very clear about that later, when the building's equity officer reached out and asked how the coordination had happened. She had written 1 letter about 1 incident. The other letters existed because the other incidents existed. She had just been the first one to write it down. The written response from Carlton Realty Group arrived on the 9th business day. It acknowledged the incident. It confirmed that a review had been conducted. It stated that Bryce had been reassigned to a different post, which is what property management companies say when they mean that someone is no longer working a particular building, and that updated protocols around identification requests were being implemented across all their managed properties, with staff training scheduled for the following month. It was signed by Deirdre and countersigned by someone with the title VP of Operations. It did not use the word discrimination. It did not say, "we were wrong," but it said, between the lines of its careful corporate language, that 5 documented accounts of the same pattern of behavior were something they could not paper over with a phone call. Celestine read it twice, sitting at her desk in Petawawa, with a cup of tea going cold beside her keyboard. Then she forwarded it to Nkechi, then to Daphne and Leah and the other two women whose names she now knew. Then she wrote brief individual replies to each of them, not long, not effusive, just, "Thank you for adding your voice. It mattered." Then she went back to work. There is something worth saying here about the way this story is usually told. In most versions, the ones that travel on social media, the ones that people share with a caption, like "you love to see it," the focus lands on the moment of reveal. The ID cards in the palm, the expression on the guard's face, the pivot from assumption to realization. People like that moment because it has a clean shape. The person with power discovers they misjudged the situation, and the wronged party gets to watch it happen in real time. That moment is real. It happened. And there is something deeply satisfying about it. If you have ever stood in a lobby, or a store, or a parking garage, and felt the specific exhaustion of knowing exactly why you're being asked for something the person before you was not asked for. But the more important thing, the thing that actually changed something, was the letter. Not the credentials in the wallet. The 3 pages, time-stamped and numbered and CC'd to the right offices. The phone call from Daphne 2 days later. The 5 accounts that arrived on a property manager's desk and made visible something that had been happening quietly, individually, to women who each thought they were dealing with it alone. Celestine Adjoa-Mensah spent 23 years in an institution that runs on documentation, chain of command, and the understanding that individual complaints become systemic change only when they are recorded and escalated properly. She knew how to write a letter that would be read. She knew who to send it to. She knew to ask for a written response rather than a phone call. That knowledge, not the Brigadier General's business card, not the crest on her ID, is what moved things. The baby shower was beautiful, for what it's worth. Nkechi's friends had strung paper lanterns across the living room in yellow and white, and there was a lemon cake from the bakery on Elgin Street, and someone had made a game where you guessed the baby's weight, and the person who got closest won a small pot of local honey. Celestine won, though she would later admit she had used a formula she learned during a field medicine refresher, and that it was only approximately fair. She helped dismantle the lanterns at the end of the afternoon and stayed to do the dishes, while Nkechi put her feet up on the couch and fell asleep between one sentence and the next, the way very pregnant people do without warning. Standing at the sink with the warm water running, looking out at the November sky going dark over the Rideau River, Celestine thought about Daphne Kouassi Tremblay, who came every week to see her father and had been told the guard was being thorough and had let it go because she didn't have time. She understood that. She had let things go before. There is a calculation that women like her make. Women who have had to be twice as prepared to be taken half as seriously. And sometimes the calculation comes out on the side of not today. I don't have the energy. It's not worth the fight. Sometimes that's the right call. Sometimes it's the only call you have left. But sometimes the dishes are done and the baby shower is cleaned up and the papers are on your desk. And you have been doing this for long enough to know exactly how to write the letter. So you write it. Nkechi's daughter was born 6 weeks later, on a Wednesday morning in December, healthy and loud, which her grandmother said suggested she already had strong opinions and a good set of lungs, both of which would serve her well. Celestine was in the waiting room at the Civic when it happened. She had driven down the night before, alone, in the dark on the 417, with the radio on and the heater running and the particular quiet that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are supposed to be going. When the nurse came out and said she could go in, Celestine walked down the corridor and pushed open the door, and there was Nkechi, exhausted and tear-streaked and laughing, and in her arms was a person who had not existed in the world 12 hours ago. Celestine stood at the foot of the bed and looked at this new person for a long time. She was already thinking about what she would tell her. Not about the lobby, necessarily. Not about Bryce, or the elevator, or the ID cards, or the letter. Those were specific things that happened in a specific November, in a specific building in Ottawa. But about the other thing, the thing underneath, that you document it, that you name it clearly and send it to the right people and follow up in writing, that you find the other women who have been dealing with it alone and you make visible what has been kept invisible, that the credentials matter less than the record, that the business card from the General's office matters less than knowing how to use it, and knowing that most people don't have a business card like that, and that the system should not require one, that the work is quieter and longer and less satisfying than the moment in the lobby. And that it is the only thing that actually works. If you watched this and felt something stir in you, recognition, or anger, or that specific exhaustion of knowing this story too well, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what you think should change, and what you think it takes to change it. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. Because the work doesn't start with credentials, it starts with refusing to let it go undocumented.